Wayne, how are you, mate?
I'm great, thanks, Chris. I'm
Yes.
looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can hear you fine, by the way. Um, so, how's New Zealand? I travelled around New Zealand in my mate's. He had a tiny Toyota. We call it a fish van here. It's like the smallest Toyota van. And he turned it into a camper, like for surfing and everything. And I had a wonderful time in your neck of the woods, just driving around and Kayakura, is it, where the seals are, and the Rotorua with the volcanic action, and of course the famous surf break at Raglan. Um, and we were saying, wasn't it, you had it quite, not to put too fine a point on it, you guys had it pretty bad during the, I even hate to use the word pandemic, but what the media called a pandemic, let's say.
Yeah, we were locked up and isolated for a while. Yeah, and it's from my point of view, it's really hurt our country financially as well as depends on what side of the coin you were. For me, it was quite challenging because I decided that I wasn't going to get the jab, as we say, or the vaccine.
Yeah, good man, good man. It's just funny, Wayne. I'll come on and tell you briefly about my story in a bit, just so you know what where I'm coming from. But yeah, I really stopped. I had my enlightenment epiphany, 1997, after chronic drug addiction, and but funnily enough, I didn't actually wake up until 2005, which is after what we say on this show, what happened in New York and Washington back 20 years ago, that big event. And a university lecturer said to me, he said, Chris, have you checked out this sort of thing? And what I'm getting at is it revolutionized how I interact with the universe.
Mhm.
Everything became different, Wayne. And when it comes to the old medical stuff, we're very limited what we can say here. I normally go to a platform called Locals, because there's a link for Locals on the screen, folks. It's our free speech platform. They don't mind what we say over there, but the whole medical thing. I mean, I haven't been ill since 2003. Um, and the media, nobody's interested in that, which I find that's bizarre. Surely, if you've got people that never get sick, you should be asking them, how do you live your life? What do you eat? What do you exercise? But sorry, I don't want to go on too long. I'm going to just go to the wonderful PDF you sent me, Wayne, and read from here so I don't do you an injustice. Wayne Forrest is a certified mastery consultant, motivational speaker, life coach, author, and TEDx speaker. A former farmer and rugby player, Wayne's life changed forever at 25 when a split second decision on the rugby field left him with a dislocated neck. Rushed to hospital, he woke up 5 days later, paralyzed from the neck down. Despite this, Wayne, you've turned your you've turned your experience into a powerful story of resilience. You've regained um, mobility, or certain mobility, and I'm not going to read off the screen anymore. But from what we've chatted, I also know you and I, we've kind of, landed in the same areas, for even though we've never met through our life journey, the warrior journey, which I'm always saying to people, you're born a legend, you die a legend. It's You've got to realize that bit that society tries to kill in between. You got to realize you're a legend for that bit, folks. So
Mhm.
without further ado, Wayne, Can you tell us a brief bit about your accident, or does that re-traumatize you talking about it?
Not these days, Chris. You know, it's been 30 years. Um, I'm one of those people that analyze things anyway and talk about things. So I'm pretty open book. Um, yeah, it was pretty devastating though, you know. I was a real fit, sort of active guy that I could shear sheep. I'd shear 350 a day. If you know anything about cutting the wool off sheep, it's like three marathons in a day. So really independent physically, and young, and all of a sudden, in a split second, I was paralyzed from a mistake that I did on a rugby field, and yeah, I can remember waking up going, "Phew, oh, please let it be an accident, a bad dream, you know," and it wasn't. Um, there was plenty of moments there that I felt like, oh God, how am I going to survive this? Um, and you have to come from this aspect of, you know, 1 minute you're so physical, and you've got a bit of ego, male, you know, brought up on a farming background and horses, and, you know, a bit of a cowboy and playing rugby and tough man image, and then all of a sudden you're broken or physically disabled, or not able to do the things you once loved. And yeah, it was a lot of tough moments. I was married. I had twin daughters of 16 months at the time. So my marriage didn't survive, but I realized that it was never meant to. Um, and I've got now two beautiful 32-year-olds with five grandchildren, and a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. So life, you know, somehow I managed to find and carve out some sort of identity in a life after that accident.
After your accident, then, did you find yourself self-medicating, Wayne, with booze or anything?
That's funny you bring that up, because I've been really looking at that just recently. And yes, the short answer is I went to alcohol because that made me happy, and it made me social. So being around others, I and you know, could forget my problems. Um, and I don't know if you like to call it lucky or not, but alcohol I could handle. Um, and so uh, I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, but I was definitely drinking heavy. And until my body pretty much told me to stop. And then the next addiction was then moved into the good old PORN, and that was my next escape. You know, I could escape into a fantasy world of such. So yeah, there's definitely, it's interesting how we um, I suppose cover up how we feel that trauma, you know, we don't, we've been taught as men to not look at it, you know, and you know, we're tough, strong, we're you know, meant to be the tough man, and you know, we're not allowed to feel that emotion that is painful. And so we push it down, and we push it down, and we push it down until we, we then look at ways to cover it up uh, by alcohol, drugs, and other addictions.
Absolutely. I mean, you're very brave. Folks, I'm just going to refer to it as the PORN. It's something that really didn't get discussed until fairly recently in society, and by that I'm talking spiritual society. I mean, it's the spiritual. That sounds a bit naff, doesn't it? It's the freedom warriors that have are bringing this to the surface. The damage it does to society, where it came from in the first place. probably won't surprise a lot of people to know, and we're not going to go there. But Hollywood's. If you understand the origins of Hollywood, not a lot of good seems to come out of it. But it's also that stuff really gets you when you're living a downward, on the downward spiral. When your body's chemicals are not in, you're not having your kundalini, you're not living with spirit or in spirit. My gosh, you get these urges, and they're so friggin' animalistic. And when you refine things, they go away. It's amazing, and like you're literally not even thinking about that in your life, except when you want to get intimate with a partner. But before we come on to that, Wayne, can we also highlight the dangers of prescription medication? In this case, I'm thinking painkillers, because I'd imagine with an accident like yours, the kind of opiate type medication was prescribed.
Yeah, earlier on, of course. I I never really went there. I looked. I was always looking forward. That became my drug. I was quite lucky in that aspect. Um, so my so-called addictions, if you like to call them that, like alcohol and that was an escape of how I was truly feeling, that emptiness within me. And that was probably, well, I know it was there before my accident. Um, th- we have, and we've talked about this a little bit, we all know that we had some sort of trauma as growing up where we couldn't explain, right? And that feeling of I'm not enough in some way, right? Especially men. And we were just talking about this before, that then my trauma of having an accident just highlighted that pain, right? It just built on top of it. I also think that same pain created my accident. I know exactly what I was thinking on a couple of moments before I had my accident. And it was me putting myself in danger because I had to prove to everyone else I was something that I wasn't, and that comes from that voice of I'm not enough. And so, yeah, just sorry, I went off task a little bit for you, but for me, it wasn't pain addiction. My addiction was then luckily to look forward and create something in my life, but I was using other means to cover up um, how I was feeling deep down inside me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I mentioned it is I was not paralyzed to the extent you were, Wayne, but I was paralyzed in the fact that I couldn't get out of bed for the best part of a year once. I ruptured one of my lower discs, and I was I was in such pain. I was drinking the strongest lager you could buy here, which is a Polish lager. It's 9%. I was drinking that for breakfast and washing down as you know, the GPs here were very reluctant to prescribe very much medicine initially, because they just thought, oh, he's got a bad back. They didn't understand the level of pain I was in, and so in order to kind of up the effect of the meds, I was knocking back this beer, and when I look back, they finally did up the medication to the point where I could get out of bed. The injury was the same, but the medication was so much stronger. I could function normally. But that whole episode, in all honesty, it didn't cost me, because we don't have regrets, do we? But it
no.
really sidestepped me for years of my life. Um, having that huge amount of medication around whenever you just wanted to sort of dip into it, and the ability to lubricate it with alcohol was really sort of dangerous. Did,
Chris, a friend once said to me, and I love this, um, shit is shit. Doesn't matter what size it is, it still stinks, right? And so I think everyone has a level of shit in their life, and uh, there's no size different. It's still shit, and it still stinks, and you know that really helped me just, I don't know, partly stop feeling sorry for my experience of being a tetraplegic and losing a lot of my physical ability. Um, but it also helped me just look and have empathy for others. And it didn't matter what they were going through, because sometimes it might seem minor for us, but your listeners are going often through some sort of shit. It might be a divorce, it might be just some sort of sadness that they have, or anxiety or depression. I think at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat, and we're all, what do we do with that shit, you know?
Absolutely. I get a lot of people say, Chris, I was never in the military and I haven't been through what you've been through, but I've been in a dark place, and I try to help people understand through this podcast that
Mm,
from my experience, most military trauma comes from childhood. It's it's unresolved childhood trauma, and then yes, incidents in adulthood, like you might lose a mate on the battlefield in sometimes horrendous conditions, but it also might be a car accident. Really, kind of is the catalyst that brings this unresolved coping mechanisms to life. Then, of course, people start self-medicating and their life starts to
mm.
spiral. Then the family is like, sorry, honey, we can't be around you when you're like this. I'm taking the kids. And the next thing you're either homeless or you're not here anymore. And we're really experiencing that quite a bit. So I totally get it. I say to these individuals, no, your trauma is your trauma. No one's trauma is like worth more because they might have done this job or not done this job. So great point.
Yeah. And to add to that, you might have shit, but none of us are broken, right? And I think, society likes to think that we're broken. Society itself looks a bit broken at times, but we're not. Nothing's broken. It's just that it's a lack of an awareness of who we truly are, and we've identified with that trauma instead of identifying with the true power that we have. Um, and you either focus on it or you don't focus on it. And I was lucky enough in most of my life, I've managed somehow to focus on creating something. And that word is part of uh, connecting to our power, and that's creation. Is create something.
Yes, and we're absolutely going to come on and talk about your phoenix rise or whatever, however we're going to term it. I just made that up. I was reading about
I love
phoenixes.
it.
Did you get this phenomenon? Like we got this weird thing in, like the Marines wants to call itself the best brother, the best boys club in the world, and and I wouldn't, I'm not here to dispute that. It's a lovely expression, and some of the boys, they're so wonderful, they're so kind. Quite often you wonder, how did we all end up in a job to kill people? Because we're all like really nice guys, it's but that's obviously another story. But when I was really like at my lowest low, I'd get so desperate just for some human contact that I'd come across an old like buddy, and some of the Marines were like really good. You could see they did not understand drugs, addiction, mental. It was just like not their bag, dude. You know, they'd never been there, but they still have the grace to say, Chris, look, you know, I really hope you're all right. You're always a brother to me. You know, anything I can do, and the genuineness in their eyes, and you know, but there was a couple of chaps that you could see they couldn't wait to get off the phone. It like freaked them out that they wanted you in this nice box. The last time they saw you, you know, you as a 13 stone bodybuilder driving a BMW with girls hanging off your arm. Yes, I was young, folks, just ignore me. Um, and now, you know, when you're showing your actual human, this is who I really am. I'm still locked into a damaged childhood, and it's manifesting now, and I'm asking for your help basically. And you'd get this response, yeah, Chris, Chris, I've just was just making a sandwich. I'm gonna call you back. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. You take care of yourself. And I'd put the phone down, and I'd feel so shit, Wayne. You know, I physically could. To me, it was just rejection. Obviously, now I frame it that that person wasn't, you know, on the part of their journey where perhaps you need to be to respond to a brother. But did you experience that at all, especially in a sort of macho culture?
Oh, definitely, mate. You know, some people couldn't handle it. Um, and normally the ones that were, I suppose, the biggest bravo, you know, sort of, they had the biggest egos, I would say. Um, but I soon worked out, Chris, that it wasn't about me. It was, you know, um, we never know what's going on in the other person's perception. And I've also worked out through having quite a tough divorce the first time that uh, it was never about me. It was, it's about the other person and how they're feeling, right? And quite often they can't look at those feelings that you're bringing up in them. And that really helped me. And I kind of clicked on to that quite early because of what I had to go through with my separation and divorce. Um, and and you know, why was this woman being so nasty? And why was she trying to hurt me so much that I soon clicked on that actually it's because she's in pain. And it's the same with your mates that can't deal with you because it's too painful or it's too frightening or it's too because it's bringing up feelings in them that they do not like. And when you start to understand that everything that we see outside of us is a mirror of how we're feeling, right? And how we're showing up. Everything's a mirror. That's why relationships with your wife is such the greatest mirror because, or your partner is because they reflect the same pain body back to you, especially when they're angry, right? Or pissed off with you. And vice versa. Why they're pissed off is because you've reflected the pain in them. So we've all got this bloody shit that we're dealing with. And when you understand that that person that's just gave me the fingers because I cut them off or supposedly cut them off in traffic, right? It's not about you. It's about how that person's feeling right now. And all it's done is reflect some sort of inadequacy or pain or sadness in us in that moment from not the moment, but our, like you said, child, childhood trauma of whatever that first pain experience was.
The road rage one is so obvious, isn't it? You know, when you've got someone and they're there, yeah, mate, yeah, and you're all like, oh, dude, calm down, please, please. It's
Well,
yes,
kids are the best, Chris. Kids are the best because they reflect our own behavior, good and bad. So when we're getting shitty and hate their behavior, we have to actually look at what's the reflection in us. And we're both fathers, and I get constantly reminded by my 16-year-old, oh, okay, I see that behavior. Oh, don't like it. Oh, that's my family or my behavior.
yes, yes. So, Wayne, tell me, I'm guessing you weren't the spiritual warrior that you are now when
No,
you were in this down phase.
no.
Were you like me? Did you have an epiphanal moment where things got so bad you were like, hang on, you know, something's got to change here?
No, it took a while, Chris. It was a bit of a path. I use some principles that I teach as well when I coach, and that is there's three things that I realize I've used that has brought me to this awareness, and that is um, a vision that has grown me or stretched me. My first vision, because just to give you a quick story, right? When I had my accident, and I was lying in that bed, the first time I really heard that inner warrior in me, it said, I said, how am I going to survive this? It said, you're going to do what you love. For me, that was farming, right? That was my first love, right from a little boy. So how the hell was I going to farm? I've got no hands, I've got limited arm strength, definitely got no torso or legs movement, and and so huge dream, right? It took me about 5 years, but I achieved it because I had a vision pulling me instead of trying to get somewhere. And I always say decision. I made a firm decision in that moment, and then I had to befriend a whole lot of fear and stepping into the new version of me. And that grew me. And then I wanted something else and something else. And that brought me to self development. And then one day I was in a course, and all of a sudden we're talking about this, inner self and what's truth and what is facts and stuff. And I got it, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I can remember being on the streets of Auckland with hundreds of people around me, bawling my eyes out, talking to my mum and dad, and realizing that I had perceived everything in my life from my perspective of some 4-year-old or 5-year-old. And that kind of woke me up. Is that It's as quick as I could give that answer, Chris.
Wow, so you had to go through something quite severe to get to the understanding that something very deep down in you from childhood was amiss.
Yeah, it took me probably nearly 20 years after my accident.
Yeah.
Just a journey, just a path. Um, like I said, I was blessed that I was looking forward and creating something, even though I was very highly disabled or lack of able. I don't know really what's the right word to use because I wouldn't call myself disabled because what I've achieved in my life in the 30 years I've been in a chair is incredible. Um, you know, So
In a
we're
chair is a nice
capable.
expression.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's yeah, it's something about wheelchairs. Yeah, chairs.
Chair sounds a
Yeah,
bit cooler. It sounds like you're out, shooting hoops and stuff.
yeah, yeah. Playing wheelchair rugby or something brutal.
Okay, this is a great chat, Wayne. Thank you. Is it fair to say we don't need to go into specifics? I always try and avoid that, but you went through some kind of childhood trauma, like an abuse, neglect, or something.
No, I don't think it has to be that bad. I think it can be just a perception that something bad has happened, right? It was probably just my dad telling me off or belittling me as a kid or telling me that I did something terrible or I should feel shame or something, right? I don't I think a lot of people do go through some horrible, horrific stuff, and I'm not trying to take away what they went through, but I think a lot of us have just got some sort of perception that we took on of real heartbreak and in that moment, and we perceive something because we're meant to. I also think that we need that trauma to unlock the spiritual awareness that you and I now have, right? And so that's the key. The trauma is the key to unlocking our best version of ourselves that we possibly can in this experience called life.
It's interesting you say that, Wayne, because one of our recent guests, a wonderful woman called Sarah Ewan, she was a former like conflict zone reporter, so she's seen some stuff,
Yeah,
and
horrible.
she's now a coach, and she said, Chris, it's not the stuff you remember that's holding you back, that's traumatizing you. She said, it's the stuff you don't remember.
Yeah.
And this is why these kind of coaches employ hypnosis, um, which I'm quite open to exploring because I still recognize my challenges, Wayne, and they're quite prominent. They feature like literally there in my life 24/7 every single day. Although people who look at my physical actions, like I just rode across the Atlantic in January, probably think, that. And I live in paradise. That's my bottom dollar. I'm never ever going to leave. But that doesn't mean that you know, there's still stuff. So I found that conversation with Sarah quite quite pertinent, a possibility.
Yeah, and that's it, right? And I talk to my clients. Um, First of all, we explore what is truth and what's fact. And for me, the only thing that I can strip down truth to, because facts change, right? So what is truth? And I always say, stay curious. Don't believe anything I say. Don't believe anything on this podcast. Don't believe anything on the news. Don't believe anything. Question everything, including your own beliefs, right? Because we then can find what is truth in our life. And there's not a hell of a lot. Comes down to, okay, are we a spiritual being having a human experience, to put it simply, for me anyway. And I would say to you, Chris, could it be as easy as changing your identity? Hypnosis will help probably with that. But what if your true identity is just a spiritual being that is full of unconditional love, has a genius mind before you got brainwashed by society and schooling and parents' beliefs, and you're abundant. What if you just took on that new identity and claimed it instead of claiming I am a tetraplegic, which I do, I claim it. I'm in a chair, I'm limited by some means or whatever. You know, I was filling that hole. Like I said, with those two things, I was filling that identity. I was escaping because I wasn't claiming the identity. I was claiming that I had some hole that I had to fill in this experience. What if it's that easy? That's
I'm
what I would say.
I'm totally with you. It gets confusing, doesn't it? Because, for example, someone said to me recently, Chris, what's your next project? I said, I'm climbing Mount Everest. Their response
Beautiful.
was, their response was, you don't have to do that. You don't have to prove anything now. I said, I stopped proving stuff to other people 20 years ago.
Mm,
I don't,
mm,
I don't, run the length of the country or row across an ocean because I need to prove stuff to people. I do it because I get one life in this form before I go back to the eternal life. And the universe sent me here to experience stuff, and I love it. It's a unique experience, Wayne, being in a 20-foot boat with your mate, and you've only got a pair, two pairs of oars, and
You're scaring me, Chris.
you're 1,500 miles away from shore,
Yeah,
and you're drinking a beer, and it's bloody brilliant. It's
yeah.
absolutely, you're living your dream, and so I kind of
And
get
that's
it.
my point. That's my point, right? For the listeners, that's my point. That's Chris's new identity, right? That's the true identity of the inner warrior or of the unlimited higher self or universe in Chris, God in Chris, whatever you like to call it. It's got many names. But I saw you come alive then, right? And that's because you've got an identity that is in alignment with who you truly are, right? The problem is we've got the subconscious mind that remembers the old identity and the trauma, and it keeps throwing that up in front of us because it's trying to keep us safe. And we all know about the flight, fright, freeze syndrome, right? Well, that is always looking out to keep Chris safe, right? So what's Chris most scared of? The old identity. So it's reinforcing the trauma in our lives, right? So we have to become aware of how we're thinking. And if it's negative, and I always say to my clients, you know when you stepped into the inner warrior or the spiritual side because it's always positive, it's always joyful, it is always happy, joy, love. If you're sad, anxious, scared, frightened, angry, frustrated, or any of those live vibrations, you are in the identity of your trauma or human experience. So, so all it is then is simply recognizing which identity you are in and stepping into the identity that you want to claim.
That's just brilliant. I'm going to write this down. Yes, which identity are you in? I tell you what's hard, Wayne, is when you do a show like this, because it I've had people email me I'm talking grown men, and they're visibly upset that I don't. And I'm sorry, I keep mentioning the military. Believe me, it's a strange old beast. But again, it's formed part of who you became, in the same way that for you not to mention rugby would be like a bit bizarre. But I've had people approach me and been like, Chris, why don't you, when you do your podcast, you introduce yourself as a Royal Marines commando, and you should wear your green beret and look at the camera and stop with all this like conspiracy stuff, because obviously I'm never going to do that, but what I'm getting at is, in the job I do, and I wear several hats, but this particular job now, the podcasting, it's so entwined with identity. Whether that's perceived or actual, I don't know, but it's almost, you get a lot of low vibrational individuals tune into a podcast, especially if they think they can get some dopamine off some trauma kind of, like the world is doomed kind of thing. And because of this low vibration, they will lash out. And so it becomes a thing that wherever you go, there's an element there that are never going to come to your face and say, I fucking hate you, you're so shit, and you're, in fact, it's the opposite. When you're in public, that exact person that will say that in your, like on the internet, will just come up to you and say, you're Chris Thrall, aren't you? I love your show. I'll always watch you. It's a really bizarre phenomenon. But again, the point I'm getting to, Wayne, is it does then be, when people talk about Joe Rogan, they don't talk about like a 5'5" bald chap who sits in a chair chatting to these incredible people. They say, yeah, Joe Rogan, he's a bit of a boy, isn't he? Look, he's got the body, he's got the physique. He goes bow hunting at weekends. He was world champion, mixed martial arts. He likes to smoke a doobie, and he's just like, do you know what I mean? It's someone said to me once, they say, Chris, and I'm not trying to be full of shit here or big myself up, but they say, Chris, a lot of people watch the podcast for the host. and so it's difficult, Wayne, isn't it, for someone like me to kind of disengage from that materialistic like facade or personality, you could say.
Yeah, and I totally get that. Because you have experienced that all our experiences are part of our identity and have helped us get that awareness, whatever that awareness is, right? And I think the idea here, though, Chris, I speak about my accident. I speak about um, some of the experiences I've had as a person in a chair, like I said before. I have an identity with that. But I think what I'm talking here is the deeper pain is understanding that I'm not choosing that trauma as my identity anymore. I'm engaging from that trauma and just calling it an experience, if that makes sense, right?
Oh, it's all like I'm getting the revelation here. For example, Wayne, like when you say to a traumatized when you congratulate them on their, let's just call them achievements. I'm not trying to like lord it over people here, folks. I'm just saying, someone asked me, like they were a bit starry-eyed and open-mouthed, what's it like rowing the Atlantic, for example? And I said, well, it's all right, it's a fun thing to do. Yeah, but it must be this, and you must be like, well, nah, not really. It's just I don't even think about it, to be honest. And I'm not trying to be dismissive here. I'm trying to say that I think people like me, for me, the things that I'm good at or I accomplish, they probably don't seem it, because maybe what you're saying, I'm still in a different identity. Like my dear mate, he drank himself to death. His name was Simon. He's in my 40 Nights book there, folks, if you've read it. And he used to juggle, and he was amazing. He'd get the balls and he'd start juggling like this. Then he'd throw one up behind his back and catch it, and throw one up behind his back. Then he'd throw it under his leg. Then he'd juggle with his knee, and it was like a circus performance. He was that good. And when you used to say, mate, that is brilliant, he'd go, no, it's not. It's easy. He'd say, it's easy. And it's what you're saying, Wayne, isn't it? It's the opting for the broken, hey, I'm a failure, I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, mate. I think what people might be missing, and you're not going to find this unless you explore what I said, and that's being curious and question everything. And that is that you're not broken, you are whole. You are magnificent for just being here on this experience. You are something really, really special. It doesn't matter who you are. And you've done these amazing things because for you, you've stared the fear of death in the face, right? So you're not possible. Well, what I'm hearing is, and I might be wrong, but what I'm hearing is you're not scared of death. You've looked death in the face so many times that you are not scared of it. So that's not your fear, right? So we've all got this fear, and I don't know what your fear might be, but it might be something to do with the trauma that you do have in everyday life, right? But my point is that we are all magnificent. We shouldn't be afraid of anything, right? All of us, because there's something greater in us still, and there will be something greater still after this lifetime. And I think that's what I'm trying to explain here, and I mightn't be doing a great job, is that we don't end, we don't begin somewhere. Only this experience begins and ends. And I think when you can find that truth, there's something amazing, because all of a sudden you won't be holding yourself back, because you'll see how bloody amazing you are. And it doesn't matter who you are in this life, in this experience as a human, you are all bloody amazing. But most of you think you're broken or missing something or not good enough, including myself and Chris at times.
Just brilliantly put, brother. That's so spot on. And you can physically see trauma in people, in the kind of the constant, and this is not a criticism, because people will see it in me, but very often when I chat with a guest and they've maybe, for example, they've written a book, and it's possibly a bit of a far out theory, but they've researched it enough that they really, they're sold on it. But they'll be really apologetic. I know people think this, and I know, people might laugh, and I know this won't go down with a lot, and I kind of almost wish I could reach through the screen and say, dude, it's fine. It's fine. Just like what other people think, that's their shit. I honestly wouldn't be getting involved in. I wouldn't be getting involved in it. You've done an amazing thing here, and you've created something. And if you think it, there's possibly others might too. Yes. Wayne, I want to go through your bullet points, because you talk about the modern masculine man. And I'll drop my little anecdote in here. I was in a beautiful fishing village in Cornwall called Padstow. They actually call it Padstein now, but some friends at home will know what I'm talking about. And I'm down there, and like, there is no way in hell I'm even sitting in my house, let alone going outside of it, wearing my underpants on my face because the BBC News told me to. I know who owns and runs the BBC News, and they know what their intentions are, and they're not good. So I turn that off, and I go out and I be a massive legend. That's just what you've got to do, right? But I'm down there in this fishing village, and I was wandering along with my family. And I happened to be staring in the shop window, and I looked to my left, and this guy was just about to enter the shop. And I suppose you could describe, I think hipster might be the word, he's a dude of our time. He's got the tattoo sleeves, the funny hair, strange beard. Says the guy who's tattooed with a beard. But and he came up to the shop door, and it was palpable. You could physically see him stop. And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out the mask. You'd think it was Zorro pulling out his sword and just about to take out 30 bad guys. And he took out his mask and he made a big show of putting it on, and then he invincibly went through the door of the shop to be a legend. And that's legend in his mind, and my version obviously is different. And I'm I don't judge, but that doesn't mean I'm blind that I don't see this stuff, right? What's going on? And I'm kind of there, and I think, mate, I don't mean to be rude, but you might have kids, or you're going to have children, and this is the example you're setting for them. And I know, because I run every morning, Wayne, right? I try and go for a jog at least. And certainly since that medical thing, this is a phenomenon that's got worse. Is you get grown men. They might be down the gym. They got rippling muscles. They've got all the the fashion accoutrements. They've got the latest state of the art phone with all the apps, and they're like Giza and cheeky Nando's and all the they're a boy. They're a boy. They're probably manager or director in their company. They're turning over a pretty penny. And yet, they'll come cycling past you, for example, in their Lycra. Their family's behind, the missus is behind, the three kids are behind on their little bike. And you go, oh. They can't say hello, Wayne. They can't do the human thing. And again, this is not a criticism of people or that individual. Something has seriously gone wrong in the modern man and the modern female, and I wondered what your take on it is.
And then look, let's talk at the first thing I would say is um, everyone is exactly where they need to be with awareness, right? So the first thing of unconditional love is because essentially we are unconditional love. Our true state is unconditional love. We're always trying to find love, um, either by conditioned or unconditional. There's only two energies here, and they're both love. We're either trying to get love or we are love, right? So in that essence, if we're trying to get love, we're trying to get attention, we're trying to force someone to love us, we're trying to um, look at me, look at me, look at me. To be unconditional love, we give. We just give love. So for all those people that want to wear lycra and can't say hello, and all those people that have to wear a mask and got some sense of fear or of whatever that is or what they've been told, then all I have to do is love on them and be the example. So for the guy riding past me, I would say hello to him every time he went past me until one day, hopefully, he would see me, right? And see that all I do or all I want to do is wish him well, right? And so that's the example of unconditional love. But let's get back to the modern masculine man. The modern masculine man has to find his truth first. And that's what we were talking about earlier, Chris, that what is that truth for you? And you have to find it. But the only way you're going to find that is to question every belief, every religion, everything in your life and stay curious. What is your truth? And that way you will start to explore and become awake to some of the ideas that are possibly running our world at the moment, or possibly what is unconditional love to you, what is conditioned love, right? I don't call it hate because I don't believe in hate. I think it's just people that are acting bad and trying to get love somehow. Even the worst murders in the world is someone feeling like they have to try to get love and they've done it very, very badly and they've ended up murdering someone, right? They're trying to fit in or whatever that is. So the modern masculine man has to stand in his truth. And every modern masculine man is in touch with his feminine side.
Yes.
He's in touch. So he's standing beside the feminine. He's standing beside the feminine as the protector, as the man who's going to stand up for his truth. And for me, that is love. You are genius. You have a genius mind. You were born genius, or majority of us were. Right? There's studies behind that with NASA back in the, I think it was this, I've got it in my book. I can't quite remember the date. But we're all born genius and we're all unconditional love, born in unconditional love until someone put conditions on us, of course, in the human experience, which created the trauma. And the third one is that we're abundant, just like we're creation. Look at how we got here. It was creation itself. It started with a seed and an egg. And then, it created a friggin' human. How the hell? That's incredible. It's the same as how a seed grows an oak tree, you know? Everything in our experience is going grow, 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 including us. You either take this podcast and what I'm saying and choose to say, right, I'm going to grow in my life. How am I going to do that? Stay curious, question everything, and have a vision that's going to stretch me into the next version of Chris or Wayne
Mm.
or whoever you are, right? And like Chris's next version or next vision is climbing Mount Everest. How cool is that? It's going to stretch Chris and he's going to
First
become a,
accomplished by a Kiwi.
I know, good old Sir Edmund Hillary, you know?
Had to have a Nepali chap push him up there, though, didn't he? Sorry,
Yeah,
Sir
and
Edmund.
no one really talks about the real leader of the group, which was a certain, I think he was a captain, wasn't he, from England?
Yeah,
What was
British
his real
Army
name?
captain, wasn't it?
Yep, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wayne, I just want to clarify. I'm feeling a bit bad. I The reason I flag up the things like the mask and the lycra,
Oh,
and
totally.
it's not because I'm some judgmental prick. It's that I love people,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I didn't.
I see the fear that people have been subjected to by what I genuinely believe is an agenda. I
Mm,
think whether, even if you don't want to get conspiratorial, the magazine culture is depraved. Whether that's, the top shelf magazines, or the bodybuilding ones, or the beauty magazines, which have a group of people sit around a table and they literally plan how they can destroy women's confidence, and they try to get you the younger the better with all the Barbie, stuff, and the Britney Spears pop music and all this kind of it's you know and I what can you say? And it is palpable, like I say now. What they achieved with that medical thing was to damage people even more than they've been damaged. And I know people don't say hello because they're incredibly shy now. And I get that.
mm,
And my simple point is, we've got we're getting overrun by immigration here, Wayne. It's so utterly obvious. They're piling in the boats across the English Channel with people whose origin is, places such as Africa. No disrespect to them, don't care. Sure, I'm sure a lot of them are great. The majority are wonderfully fine people, but the point is, I see the agenda. Now, your typical British
mhm.
male who thinks he's up, maybe
Totally.
thinks he's a bit hard and da da da, all they see is they think it's the government are have ineptitude. That the reason this is happening is our government is a bit inept. So if we get another government in, this is all going to stop. And I'm trying to encourage people to kind of look a bit more above that. Have a look. Do you think leaders are elected or are they selected? Because that's a crucial kind of balance point. And that's why I mentioned the thing with the, saying hello in the
Yeah.
morning. Um,
And
just,
and Chris, I totally that was my intention. It was more that that's how I remind myself.
mm,
Because I totally understand what you're doing, and it's good that we have these conversations, and your conversations, because it is hopefully waking people up to, there is uh, a manipulation or a um, conditioned love. You do this, and we'll give you that, and it comes from way up. And I believe the only way that we're going to stop that is people standing in their own truth and standing up for what is truly right, and that is um, uh, protecting our loved ones and I totally agree. We're seeing um, the US putting, a hard line down on immigration. And like, one side will talk about, oh, how unfair that is. But if you look at the truth of it, there's a lot of people, damaged people coming into the country that is hurting the residents of that country. And you have to protect, what is conditioned love? Sometimes unconditional love has to be tough. You have to be tough. You have to have borders because that's where we're at. So I totally agree with what you're saying, mate. It's just that's my take on it, how I have to look at it and bring myself
Yeah,
back to that.
it's and I'm trying to get my head around this as well, because I'm willing to put my hand up and say I don't really know very much. you know of all the knowledge out there, I know I've got like a thimbleful, and I'm trying to make sense of it. It's just the same as everyone else's. And my issue is like, one of the most beautiful things in my life is just to go and sit in the backyard with a bit of sun on my face. And I know no one can tell me in that moment I don't live in paradise. No one can.
Beautiful.
And that moment is always there. Although in England it might be rain quite a lot. And here's the thing though, I could have done that during the whole medical thing, right? I could have done what a lot of podcasters did, because I know a lot of the biggest podcasters, and they just continued like normal, without mentioning the things that we now know have hurt an awful lot of people.
Yeah,
Instead, I put my whole career on hold, not because I'm brilliant or whatever. I felt morally duty bound to stand up for these monsters that are trying to go into the schools with this ridiculous, like,
agree. And that's the thing, right? That's coming back to what I was saying. You're standing up in your truth.
but what should I have done, Wayne? Should I have gone, Chris, spiritual battle, go and sit in the garden with the sun on your face, what will
No,
be? Or should
no,
I?
no, you have to stand up with what's true for you, right? You have to say, you have to do the best you possibly can in unconditional love, right? If you'd done that, it would have been conditioned love. If you'd gone and said, I'm going to just sit in the garden and I'm going to ignore this is a spiritual battle, well, you're not doing what's true. So you are in conditioned love.
Yes, I'm just writing this down. It'll be a good title for the um,
The next book.
good title for this podcast. Yes, thank you for saying that. I found it difficult, when I looked at people that ducked, they ducked it. They ducked what was going on so they can continue their life. Um, they've now got hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube, and I'm still, I'm still in the trenches. And it's absolutely fine. This is not like sour grapes or anything like that. Um,
But we needed you to, Chris. We needed someone else to put up a different side of the argument because it was being shut down.
yes.
I know because it got shut down here in New Zealand. Like we weren't allowed to have a say. We weren't allowed to say a question. We weren't even allowed to ask a question. So, because as we talked about, we chose not to vaccinate. And yeah, it was, we weren't even allowed to ask the question. We weren't even allowed to ask the nurse who was giving the so-called, whatever that we're not allowed to talk about.
Wayne, I've just got to, because we've had such a wonderful chat for a bit longer than I thought. My next appointment's trying to get into this meeting. I'm just going to tell him.
Yeah, we've got a Kiwi that won't shut up.
I'm just going to say 10 minutes, brother. Kiss, kiss. There we go. Yes. Oh, Wayne, I cannot thank you enough. You have brought so much clarity to just me knowing you for 2 hours or whatever, an hour and a half. That is and I'm a life coach. I must be a bloody bad one.
No, no, not at all.
Oh, so friends, when we wake up tomorrow morning, maybe we're having a bad day, maybe we're a bit stressed by the boss or whatever it might be, we're going to say, which identity are you today, Chris? Are you the massive legend that goes out and you're firing and everything is exactly the way it's meant to be and you're perfect the way you are? Or are you going in a past identity which no longer exists, that's not working to your benefit? And as such, every little thing is really gonna hit you, and it's gonna be like that rebound when you get hit by a bullet and your body, the ripples of shock. So, Wayne, I can't thank you enough. I think we should have a part 2, don't you?
Anytime, Chris, I'd love to.
I'm going to get your book cover up because I try not to forget that. I absolutely cannot wait to read this. I mean that 100% from the bottom of my heart. I'm going to order it today. It's incredibly well priced. Even here in the UK, it's £6, just over £6. I'll put a
Well,
link below it, folks. Link below the podcast, folks.
yeah, Chris, and if someone really resonates with this, I have put aside enough time for the first five that resonate with what I've said and want to explore more. A complimentary session with me, and it's a 45-minute session one-on-one. And we just look at what is that trauma, what is that trigger moment, um, and together. And once we see that, then what is the vision you would love to create? And we'll step into that. And then there's a bridge, there's a gap between those two. So we'll look at a step in the direction of that vision for you in that session. So if that resonates with someone, it's absolutely complimentary. There's normally a value of 250 US dollars for that time. So yeah, don't waste time and get in there and jump in there if it really resonates with you. And I'd love to serve those 5 people.
I'll add to that. Friends, Wayne is
I'll give
also,
you the link. Yeah.
we didn't get around to discussing it, but we'll chat next time. Wayne is a TEDx speaker, and I can tell you to get to that level of speaker, they're not just taking anyone. And I can also tell you that there are life coaches out there, let's just say there's very few that really get it, Wayne. There's very few. A lot of them, their profile picture is them standing in front of the trademark Ferrari. The very thing that creates so much trauma and hardship in our life is striving for materialistic gain. is their pitching is the thing that, when you're battling trauma, that you should aspire to. And I'm laughing, I'm not judging, I'm just trying to make light of the situation. But friends, I would say Wayne really, really sounds like he knows what he's talking about. This has been an absolutely great chat. So Wayne, we're going to put all your links below, link for the book, link so people can get hold of you. Please do, folks. That just leaves me to say massive thank you for coming on the show. Friends at home, if you could like and subscribe, click the notification bell. As Wayne said, I think, we're put here for a reason, and our story and what we put out is here for a reason. And I think on this show, you're definitely better invested than just watching the fear porn stuff all the time. But that's just my thoughts. Right, that's it. Wayne, give my love to New Zealand and to yourself and your family. A massive love to everyone out there. Let's chat soon. Ciao, ciao.
Love it, Chris. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cause I've been living